In 1986, I was a junior in college working at a college radio station. My job was to play a bunch of sad and depressing songs from The Cure and Joy Division and The Smiths. All great stuff, but not a lot of laughs. Those are bands who took their music very seriously, and their fans were often more serious than some of their favorite bands, often dismissing some music as not being serious enough. And then something happened on November 4th, 1986, because that's the day when the two guys from Lincoln, Massachusetts, calling themselves They Might Be Giants, released their first album with their very first single, the insanely catchy and joyful sounding classic, Don't Let's Start. For guys like me who appreciate a good songwriting and thoughtful but quirky lyrics and a significantly lighter tone, I fell in love with this record, just like I fell in love with their next 21 records. Over the years, John Linnell and John Flansburgh have become some of the most prolific musicians you're going to find anywhere, with music that's clever, infectious, sophisticated, silly, and thoroughly enjoyable all at the same time. But make no mistake, They Might Be Giants are serious musicians who have gone on to win Grammy Awards, sell millions of records. They've even released a number of children's albums that are just as fantastic. They Might Be Giants are not only back on the road next year to play their album Flood in its entirety, they're also releasing a brand new album, a coffee table book-style companion, interestingly enough, both called Book. This is my conversation with John Flansburgh from They Might Be Giants. It's Baxy's musical podcast.
What is it?
It's Baxy's musical podcast.
Did you finish your dinner?
Yeah.
You did?
Just had my last bite.
Man, because you said you needed 3 minutes. That's like some Kobayashi shit right there.
It's delicious ramen, but actually lovingly made by my wife, and I have to say it was amazing.
I'm glad you're full.
Yes. Yes.
I got a lot on the plate here, so I have to tell you, I've been with you guys in spirit since the very beginning, 1986, when I was in college.
Excellent.
And it's, you know what, it's been one of those real satisfying type of, rides with the band when you see what they do over a period of time, and it's a real pleasure. So, and I want to start off right away. I feel like I got to ask this question. After all of these years, after all that's happened between you and John, in a steel cage death match, who finally wins? Is it XTC or Adamant?
I think it would be a draw. I mean, I think that's the dynamism of the song is that it never ends. I think the sort of the lusty Dionysian appeal of somebody like Adamant versus the sort of heady, cerebral, thought-provoking, imagination-sparking XTC. That's what's great about life, is that both of those things are available to all of us.
I can't say that was the answer I was hoping for, but it was the answer I expected. So,
really?
You.
Okay. Well,
I'm a big XTC fan. So, and Adamant won't return my phone calls, so I'm kind of leaning one way, but I understand the argument.
It's a good gateway drug into the world of Adam and the Ants, which is my preferred format for Adam Ant.
Of course.
Is Bow Wow Wow. Those first two Bow Wow Wow records are really fantastic.
Oh, they are.
And they're super weird. I mean, like, they're just like raging. They almost kind of predate kind of ecstasy, party music. But it's great stuff, and once you're kind of into that rhythm section and the way that they work stuff out, it's kind of a joy to listen to Adamant. I don't like all the songs. I don't like Prince Charming very much.
No, but I hear what you're saying. Percussion wise, those albums are really unique. But
yeah,
either way, I'm glad I got the answer finally. If I have to call you back another 21 years to see if we've gotten any further in the argument, I'll do it. Hey, congratulations on the new stuff. I'm really excited to see it. The book, the new album, ironically all called Book. This is a pretty labor-intensive, quarantine-friendly undertaking you guys have done. Tell me about how this all came together with the book.
Well, I mean, we basically were wrapping up an album with ambitions to do this book project kind of on the docket, but not really confirmed. It all kind of happened. It all kind of everything with the COVID came down right as the work for this really began. I mean, the work on the book side of things. Our album making processes don't have like a really set schedule. Sometimes we sort of think we're done, and then we end up working on it more in earnest. And that was kind of what happened. We had 2 weeks of work ahead of us with a set of songs in February of last year, and then ended up going back into the studio in December and ran 2 studios simultaneously. One, while Pat Dillett was mixing, we were recording new songs and, going through the whole sort of hassle of getting everybody tested and being distant and, masked up and all that jazz. So, we did this sort of bonus round where we brought in a clutch of new songs. I can't remember exactly which ones, or we just kind of amped up the overall quality of the record with the final effort, and it was pretty intense because we were the running 2 sessions at the same time thing really makes you feel like a fiend.
Well,
It's the second you stop doing one thing, you're kind of you're jumping into another thing. So it's like having 2 sets of recording engineers going at it.
Well, I would imagine having extra time on your hands is it can be a curse and a blessing at the same time. On one hand, you can always try to improve on what you have, but there's also the other possibility where you're maybe even overthinking something.
Well, I wish I knew more about having too much time to finish things. That's in general our experience is not that we have an overabundance of time. I mean, in fact, I feel like for us, the more time we have to work on something, it's almost uniformly better. Sometimes I think we get a little bit lazy, but also, there's only so much work and reworking of things that we can afford as projects professionally. So it's like I'm always happy when we actually get to kind of buff and polish what we're doing a little bit extra.
Well, I'm excited about the book because we're kind of like around the same ballpark in age, and back when we were kids and buying records, albums. I mean, there was just something magical about being able to hold it and read it and learn about everything. That's not the experience you get when you're downloading an MP3. I mean, it's like you're basically touching air and then trying to absorb what the artist is trying to tell you, and that's why when I say that there's a book that is associated with the record, that's kind of exciting and appealing to me. And I don't know if it's just an age thing or it's just like a music fan type of thing.
It might be an age thing. I mean, I don't. We weren't trying to figure out how to make the purest expression of like an okay boomer impulse by doing this, but it does kind of speak to the appeal of a tactile object to work with while you're listening to music. I think the thing that's the problem. I mean, there are shortcomings with streaming. I think that one of the things about streaming, the whole streaming experience, is that the topic of streaming is always moving. Is sort of essentially moving on. Like I think it's always prompting you to listen to something else,
right?
Which is in its own way kind of robbing you of like that intense one-on-one experience that you can have if you're listening to a record or even a CD or a cassette. I mean, just any physical media is so much more limited. But I don't know. I mean, I listen to a lot of I do a lot of streaming, so I can't. I'm already like well on the other side of that thing. I own 3 working stereos with record players, and I love those as well. But it's ultimately, as an active music listener, there's a lot of stuff that I listen to that just isn't available except on streaming.
Well, I'm not indignant about it. I mean, I stream everything too, and I wind up putting like every CD I have on my phone just so it's available with me all the time. But I do appreciate the effort when an artist says, "Okay, here's something for you to grab onto," because to me, that's a real valuable experience that then connects you even stronger to the intent of the music.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is like, we got an opportunity to collaborate with an incredible graphic designer and an incredible photographer and make this thing that was just its own kind of standalone project, and that was thrilling for us. It was it was a big challenge, and I'm very happy with how sort of dignified it is and how real it is, and it's just cool. It is strangely anachronistic in 2021 to be working on something in print, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not trying to figure out everything here. We're just doing our thing.
I started the interview off telling you that I was in college radio back in 1986, and there was something that happened when that first album came out that I thought was really interesting. It's one of those things that you don't really forget. I remember half the kids, at this college radio station playing "Don't Let's Start" and "Hotel Detective," and the other half of the kids, were insisting that it wasn't dour and depressing enough. It wasn't the Cure, the Joy Division, or the Smiths, so it couldn't possibly be taken seriously. But within a few days, everyone's singing that song in their head, and they can't let it go. I think it says something that you guys, were releasing something alternative to alternative music at a time when, everyone was taking everything so seriously. There was a real refreshing change to have someone come up with something that takes real talent, but couldn't really be conceived as like a novelty act or a joke act. The songs were just too good for that to happen.
Well, that's a very generous thing for you to say about our songs. I mean, you never really know what culture your output is going to land in. I mean, I think we were very much a product of New York City at that moment, and it was so wide open. There's just the entire cultural landscape was just on a local level was being recast in so many different ways. Hip hop was exploding, and the downtown music scene was exploding, and there was all this art collaborations happening, and just a lot of the spaces we played in were essentially half performance art venues. So it was just a really, we were coming from a very different place. We didn't really know about alternative rock college rock in that sort of broader categorical sense, because I guess we just didn't get it. We didn't hear it in New York City. I mean, when I went to Antioch in Ohio, which is near Dayton, and there was a college radio station there. And I remember just a few years earlier hearing, the music on that station that would obviously be like the antecedents of what would become alternative rock. But we were kind of ignorant of a lot of the main stuff that was happening in college rock until we actually started touring, which happened a little bit later. I mean, it wasn't until we didn't really start doing big national tours till like '88. So, and that was when all that stuff, just the whole big, generation of alternative rock bands were exploding. I think it really moved from English bands to American bands between '86 and '88.
Right.
And we were just playing in clubs where Husker Du were playing the night before, and the Replacements were playing the night after us, and it was just that was just what it was. It was a very American. It was lots. I'm talking about venues that hold 200 people, but
right.
all the if you just look at the calendars for those venues back then, it's pretty dazzling in a way. I mean, I'm sure there are venues that are doing things right now that will seem just as impressive later on, but it's when I think about it, it was a very cool time to be coming up.
Well, it's interesting as you mentioned Antioch. So I went to school at Marquette, which was in Milwaukee, and I think there was some geographical lag, throughout the country in different scenes. Obviously, we were close enough to Chicago, close enough to Minneapolis. There were things going on, in those two cities at the time. But the things that were going on in New York, things that were going on in Los Angeles and some other parts of the country, like Athens, Georgia. I mean, it took a long period of time before that got integrated in college radio. So when They Might Be Giants comes out, and it's such an unusual change to the REMs and the Husker Dus and even the Replacements. It's like it sticks out, but undeniably great. That's what the whole point of what I was trying to say. It's like no one has ever sounded like They Might Be Giants before or since.
I mean, I think one of the things that was sort of nice about the general impulses of that moment was that, a lot of the bands were pretty different from one another, just in a kind of effortless way. A lot of the stuff that a lot of the acts that were around us in New York didn't really make it out of New York. I mean, it wasn't really designed, it wasn't scaled to be like a national thing. A lot of it was just kind of for fun. But I'm curious, like, do you remember a venue in Milwaukee called the Mine Shaft?
I do remember the Mine Shaft.
I played at the Mine Shaft. We played at the Mine Shaft. I think we might have even played there twice.
Well, I might have been there at least once for that show. But
you would remember, if you saw us at the Mine Shaft, you would remember, because this very, very weird thing happened. Two weird things happened. First of all, Jerry Harrison from the Talking Heads came to the show and stood in the back of the room for most of the show, which I was kind of unaware of, but our sound man was near him and was very aware that he was there. But meanwhile, there was a kid in the audience who, and this is, I regret to report that this is not the only time this has happened in our careers, because it's so singular. You would hope it would only happen once. But a boy, probably kind of underage and really seemed sort of off his meds, was actually stood right in front of us and flipped us the bird for the entire show. And it was exactly as distracting as you could imagine. I mean, we're just doing song after song after song, and people are clapping, and everything's fine, except that like 3 feet in front of us, there's a guy flipping us the bird, and it just kind of was it was just a drag, it just kind of wore us down as it happened, and. Then at the end of the night, we were like packing up the T-shirts and I think putting them into the van, and the guy came up to us and wanted to buy a T-shirt, and he was just effusive about how much he loved the show, and we were just like, why did he flip the bird at us for the entire show? And he had no explanation. He just was like, I was just playing with you, man. Ah! It was completely nuts.
I think that's the Milwaukee clap, if I'm not mistaken. That's how we would applaud.
Yeah. Well, we got a very bad case of the Milwaukee clap.
Yes. Well, many people did over the years. Wow. So, what's amazing to me is, 22 studio albums, 9 live albums, 21 EPs, 10 compilations. If it weren't for Wikipedia, I probably couldn't keep up with the numbers. I mean, it's a remarkable amount of work for two people to do together for that period of time and not want to kill each other in the process. I mean, it's tell me about the relationship that you and John have forged over, all of these decades.
Well, we started as friends. I mean, we were really good friends, and we shared a lot of passions in common. And so it was a very easy collaboration from the get-go, and it has not been dramatic over the years. We kind of set our sails and went about trying to make a go of it, doing this thing. It certainly has gotten a lot better than we ever anticipated. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think when we started we had any notion that we would. It was our dream to make a record, but I don't think we ever thought it didn't seem that likely that we would get to make an album. So it was very gratifying just to make an album in the first place. And I think from that point on, we've just been kind of rolling with things as they went. It's nice. It's great to have such a big catalog of songs to draw on. It makes doing shows really easy because we can change things up. We can change the show up really radically,
right? And
it's not hard, but it does make it interesting. I think the only thing I regret is like just speaking as somebody who I really enjoy John as a friend. I really like hanging out with him, but there's so much professional time that we're essentially trapped together. It makes it impossible for us to think about socializing in a lighthearted way because we are kind of the living embodiment of the job that we have in the world. It's like, when John comes around, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm at work now. And that's kind of a little bit sad, and I'm sure it's, John, I suspect John feels the same way. It's like we do have a really good time just hanging out and goofing off, but we are going to be basically spending so many so many days flying to Australia and back, or driving to the Upper Peninsula and back, or whatever. It's like it's there's no end to the amount of travel that we are kind of chained together doing. That it's sort of unfair to our relationship.
One of the things that you guys did early on, which I thought was really fascinating, and in hindsight, when I think about it, it's probably bigger than it even seemed at the time. The dial-a-song phone line, at the time.
Oh yeah.
I remember calling it a few times, when I could get through, and after a while, giving up because I could never get through. When I think about what that really meant to your fans, in a way, it was kind of building an early form of social media, because people who were interested to find out what you guys had put on your phone machine, elicited an action that they would never normally have taken. And I know it lasted for a good long period of time, but that had to take an awful lot of discipline for the two of you to keep up with that every single day.
Well, I'll be honest, or candid. I'll be candid with you and tell you that there was a little bit of sleight of hand with Dial-a-Song, which is that we had, at any given time, we had a catalog or a library of 30 or 40 recordings, and we were pretty continuously trying to improve on those recordings, but they still revolved around. So, if you called every day for a couple of months, you would hear repeat songs. So it wasn't like we were cranking out 350 songs in a year.
Right.
That wasn't what was happening. But it did have the illusion of that, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah, but John, you couldn't get in. You couldn't get the number 365 days a year.
It was. By the end of, at the peak of it, I think I had, before it was computer based, I had a dozen phone machines, and half of them were in the shop at any given time, so they were just being repaired. And I would pick up the 4 or 5 or 6 machines from the repair guy in Hell's Kitchen, who just lived in an ashtray,
right?
And then the other ones would inevitably break as well. So it was definitely hopping. People would be calling day and night. It was wild how successful it was, because it just was such a cultural UFO, and it was interesting to be that band. I don't even think people. It was probably more like, for a lot of people, it probably framed as more like the way people think of the Jerky Boys or something, or what's the Auto-Tune the News or something. It was just like a cultural thing. It was its own thing. It was kind of self-defined. It was nice.
From a fan's point of view, because, you're right. Obviously, the amount of material you would have to do this every single day would have been, virtually impossible. But the fact is, people were interested in what was coming up next, even if it meant, they're calling that number over and over again just to get through. As this is going on, the two of you must have just been like shrugging your shoulders and thought, whoever thought this would happen?
Yeah, but it was good because, honestly, we had been a local band for a couple of years, and we had just gotten to the point where we couldn't really convince our friends to come out to our shows anymore. And you're in this sort of perilous, limbo between kind of people, it was nice that our friends liked us and that our friends supported us so hard for so long. But there definitely was this moment where we're kind of teetering on oblivion in like 1985. We did a lot of shows in the East Village before anything was really happening for us, and I'm not sure why we were very uncalculating about what we did. We just I mean, in the same way that we just took on the Dial Song project without really knowing what it would entail. We also just played a ton of shows. It was we would play 50 shows. We played 50 shows in New York City every year for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. It was really a riot of work.
A few years later, you guys started to do something which I thought was a really smart idea for you guys to do, and I assume you were probably at the age where being parents and being involved in families probably meant a little bit more to you than when you're like a 21-year-old kid buying another answering machine. But the kids CDs, the albums, I thought were really, really clever and really, really smart, because my kids got to hear those songs when they were little. And in the same way, like, the Electric Company and Sesame Street were kind of formative in some of that stuff, to put education, in the form of really catchy, earworm type of music, was just a brilliant idea for you guys.
Oh, well, I thank you. That's a very kind thing to say. It's a strange move to make. I think we wouldn't have done it if we hadn't felt like we were pretty defined culturally as a rock band. Like I felt like everyone understood what They Might Be Giants meant, and we were pretty secure in that. Professionally, I think a lot of people are afraid to do anything for kids because somehow it makes you, I don't know what the word would be. It's not exactly, well, I guess it's sort of infantilizing in some essential way. And so much of popular music is a kind of posturing and being, hyper posy and hyper sexual and just doing all this stuff that
Right.
is really not the domain of kids stuff at all. I'll tell you, like, just as a songwriter, writing songs for kids is one of the easiest and happiest kind of assignments you can have. It's just it's so wide open, and the challenge is so basic. It's just it's sort of, you can kind of get into a headspace of writing a song when you're writing for somebody who isn't thinking about what songs are on the charts or isn't thinking about the history of popular music or anything. It's just like
Right.
it's just they're in the moment, and it's like everything's new. So it's just it's exciting to write stuff for kids.
Well, I think what's cool about it is, I think you're right. It's probably a challenging and very rewarding, but there's also, for a lot of people who have done it, and They Might Be Giants is certainly not the only ones who have done this. You write a song, the catchiness of your regular style, but that the message of the music could be pandering or actually talking down to children, as opposed to what you were doing, where you're taking your career, which had been very entertaining, and then applying it to something that kids could actually relate to and understand. That's where, to me, it becomes a little bit more challenging, because there could very easily be that temptation to kind of do it the wrong way.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll tell you, a lot of, I've been asked about this before, and it is true when you sort of enter into the world of kid stuff. Even the people you're working with who are, producing the product will just say, like, well, you don't have to work that hard on it. It's like it's and you're just kind of thinking, well, that's pretty cynical way of approaching this project, But we were really kind of into it, especially when we started. It was a really interesting, different kind of challenge, and it was. I'm very glad we did it. I don't know actually how much more kid stuff we'll ever do. We've the last 10 years have been really preoccupied with kind of just getting back to our basic things. So.
Right. You put a lot of pressure on yourself as a songwriter. I know I've talked to a bunch of people that do it, and it's on one hand it's a gift, and on the other hand it can be a curse too, especially if the songs are not coming to you at the same rate that you want. When you're talking about like 22 albums, you must at some point find yourself in a space of writer's block because there's two of you. Does that relationship make it easier to get past those moments when nothing else is coming to you?
I think it does, actually, and it's pretty undefined how it does. I think in some ways, we're kind of it's a challenge to keep up with the other person, and you don't want to be the bad roommate who's not like holding up their end of the bargain. And there's also like a certain amount of work that we're always doing together, and what's nice about that collaboration, is that I think it always keeps whoever might be having a little bit of writer's block for what's actually happening. It just gets everybody back into the mix. There was one moment right after we did. It was the third Kids album that we got nominated for a Grammy for our second Kids album, and Disney wanted us to do a follow-up record right away. And Disney was the one thing about Disney that was different than working with other labels was they were really into deadlines, which is not surprising. But and we had worked in television and worked at doing advertising, so we had the ability to kind of schedule our work and figure out how much time we needed to focus up to get things turned around and finished. So it wasn't unprecedented, but doing two Kids albums in a row, and then basically trying to do an adult album immediately after, which would be the album Join Us, proved to be a little bit of a breaking point. We actually both ended up going into a bunch of recording sessions with nothing finished, and that really felt, it really felt like we were at the end of the line. I mean, I don't think anybody ever nobody. I don't even know if the guys in our backup band, felt like it was that unproductive. But I think both John and I, we like to have stuff really wrapped up before we go into the studio. Like we do extensive demos, and we work on stuff and work stuff out pretty well in advance most of the time. And to go into recording sessions with like nothing, even if you're coming out with something that's fun or interesting on the other side of it, it's not us. It's just not the way we like to work. Yeah. And we actually ended up stopping the process and kind of taking a month off and just breaking to regroup. And that was really the only time in the whole scope of. I can't think of any other moment where we ran the risk of the wheels falling off the bus.
Because I think of songs like Mesopotamians, and I laugh every time I hear it because I'm thinking, if I ran out of ideas, all I really need to do is maybe look at some names of Sumerian leaders splitting a stick of gum between other members of the band, and it just makes me laugh because while it's ridiculous on some level, it just shows you that creativity can come from literally anything, and I think that's kind of the magic of what the two of you have done over the years. It's like a little spark of influence can really kind of just inform an entire song, regardless of how crazy it may be.
I have to say, I remember that song is entirely from the ultra vivid imagination of John Linnell, and I remember being in the studio and him coming in with that song, and speaking of things just being fully formed, the demo of the song was completely sorted out. I mean, it had all the background vocals, all the breakdowns, all the parts, all the solo moments. It was just all laid out for us to kind of reproduce with live instruments, and it was just done. Yeah. And it was an amazing. I mean, I have to say, John is just like such an extraordinarily talented guy, and it's I'm always just amazed at just what a font of imagination he is. It's really great working with somebody like that. Sometimes it's a little daunting, but he's a total gent about everything. So it's just like it's fun. It's fun. It's an interesting project to be a participant in.
You and John both grew up in Lincoln, Massachusetts. I grew up about 50 miles south of you.
Oh, wow.
In Massachusetts, I grew up in the town of Rehoboth, which is one of those towns that people in most of Eastern Mass don't even know. Kind of like
Rehoboth. I know Rehoboth, but I always refer to it as Rehoboth, not Rehoboth.
Well, it's it could be either one. It's kind of like the difference between ton and ton. It's the same kind of thing. But it's such a small town. I think Rehoboth and Lincoln are about the same size, just a couple thousand people. Although, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it is also the home of Greg Hawkes from the Cars. So that's kind of cool. But when you guys were young, I know that you weren't involved musically until many, many years later. The idea that you guys could come from the same town, know each other, and then come together later on. Just talk about for a minute about that moment when you discover this musical side to both of you.
Well, we grew up. We were, teenagers in the 70s, which was a really rich time to be a music fan. And we went to a lot of shows together as teenagers. Like we both would go out. A friend of ours worked for WBCN and could get us into a lot of things for free or very little money. So even as teenagers, we were seeing bands from New York and bands from Boston, and just kind of, we were like the youngest people in the room, but we were totally into it, and it was really just this very vivid moment. John and I saw Perubu at the Rathskeller in like 1978, I think,
or
77. Mink DeVille, the Talking Heads at the Paradise, all sorts of bands, just Blondie at the Orpheum. It was just a great. These memories are so dusty. It's breaking up the hard drive. But it just was like a great. It was just a great time to see shows, and we had lots of friends who were, kind of had. We all had this sort of shared experience and shared sensibility. So it was I think we were all informed by one another, and so it was just a very easy mix. It wasn't like, I was in bands with other people from that clique of friends, and it was very similar. It was like we had so many shared experiences, and rock music was so in our heads. It just was fun.
So you guys are going to be touring next year, and I know a lot of the dates are rescheduled from dates that were canceled during COVID. I know you're coming to Western Mass a couple times. You're coming to Northampton in March, Mass Mocha in September. Most of according to the website, most of these shows that you've rescheduled, they're already sold out. There's very few tickets available for these. So that's kind of cool. When you've got so much other stuff to offer, the new record, the book, and everything else.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting time. I hope it's not too exciting. We're by March. I hope things are settled down more than they are now, and it's hard to know if it keeps on being freaky. Maybe maybe it would make sense to reschedule again, or I don't know. I don't want to put anybody in harm's way, put it that way. But no, I don't know. I haven't really been going out. I live like I live a very monastic existence.
But you still have your wife making ramen noodle meals for you.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
You're still getting together with John to make music, and you will at some point come out to Western Mass. And when that happens, I'm going to find that kid from Milwaukee with the middle finger and see how it goes for you.
I am looking forward to that.
Hey, John, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Like I said, I've been following you guys since the very beginning, and to have a few minutes talking to you, it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, John. Very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Again, the name of the new album and the book by They Might Be Giants are both called Book. They're now available for purchase, and they are both very well done. Thanks for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like it, review it, share it amongst your friends. You can always email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. And thanks again for listening to Baxi's Musical Podcast.